you a lot. So, hi and welcome. We're live in the Club Soda Facebook, or also on YouTube. I'm Drew Jaeger. I'm one of the co-founders of Club Soda, and I am thrilled to be joined by Annie Grace. Hi, Annie. How are you doing?
Hi, Drew. Great. It's so nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. So if you've hung around Club Soda for a while, or if you've been interested in changing your drinking, maybe you've been experimenting with going alcohol free for any period of time, or if you've ever picked up Quitlet, it's really likely that you would have heard Annie's name. Her name comes up in conversation all the time in the community. People who've done the alcohol experiment, people who've bought and read This Naked Mind. It's fair to say, Annie, that you cause waves in our community, and people have a lot of respect for you. And for those in the community who don't know you, I wonder whether we could just kind of rewind a little bit, and if you could kind of introduce yourself, but I guess really kind of root that in. What got you started in this area of work in the first place? What's it about for you personally?
Yeah, awesome. So my story sort of in a nutshell is that I wasn't a big drinker in college, and then I moved to New York City, and I was actually asked by my boss why I wasn't going out to happy hour, and I was like, well, I don't really drink, and he sort of said, Annie, it's not about that. It's about the fact that we're all too busy during the day, and you need to show up, because this is where, careers are made. It's kind of like the golf course. And I was like, all right. So I said, right, then I'm going to have a method. And I had I promised myself that for every glass of wine I was going to drink, I would drink a pint of water, so that I would never be kind of one of those people dancing on the table or making a fool of themselves. And I would even do things like, if I felt like I was getting too tipsy, I would sneak off into the bathroom and make myself throw up that last glass of wine just to keep drinking with all of these people that were older than me, had much higher tolerances. But really fast forward about a decade, I got myself promoted lots of times. I was now actually working for a company headquartered in London, traveling back and forth pretty much every other week, and also in charge of 28 other countries. So I was traveling, globally on a very regular basis, always, in business class where all the alcohol was flowing, and big expense account where I was expected to buy all the alcohol for all the people, including myself. And I was actually coming home from Heathrow. I was in Heathrow Airport. I was in kind of the train tunnel. And I had been really trying to get back on my drinking for a few years by this time, and it had been tearing me up. I had this, I tried to make myself these rules where, all right, no drinking until Thursday, and then I wouldn't make it. So I'd be like, okay, Wednesday, and I wouldn't make it, and then finally I'd be like, okay, just one alcohol-free day a week, you can do that, and then I wouldn't make it, or I'd set a limit on number of drinks, and all of these just broken promises, and I really was. All of this, it's so funny because we think about conflict, right? Like you're walking down the street and you see somebody fighting, probably not these days because of, we're all in our houses, but imagine you walked up, maybe on the television, you see some conflict and it makes you feel uncomfortable. Or if you're at home and you're fighting with the people in your house, it makes you feel really uncomfortable. We don't think about the fact that if we are in our own mind and we are having this big argument with ourselves, both wanting to drink more and less at the same time, it's really painful. And I think it's like one of the most painful parts of the whole journey. And so I was in deep pain in this moment, and I had been asking the typical questions, am I an alcoholic? What's wrong with me? Do I have a problem? Like these questions that just induce more pain and more fear, and actually you just drink to escape from the questions themselves. And so this one day coming home from Heathrow, I just kind of was struck by this moment of like a new question. And that question was, well, why? Like, why? Why does this kind of fermented liquid in a glass like have control over my life, where I feel like I'm together and I've got 2 kids, I've got this career, I feel success. Like, why can't I get control of this? And no lack of trying, no lack of all the rules, all the methods, all the ways. And so I just had this kind of moment of like, you know what? I'm going to let myself totally off the hook and answer that question. And so I did something, I didn't realize how kind of radical it was, but I stopped trying to stop drinking. And I said, I'm trying to stop drinking. I'm going to give myself a year. at the out, and I'm going to see if I can just understand why. So what I did is I approached it really methodically. I made myself a list of all the reasons I drank. I went and asked a bunch of my friends all the reasons they drank. And I just started going, like, buying studies, downloading them. And I just learned like crazy stuff. You know, you think alcohol relaxes you. Well, alcohol actually induces your body to release cortisol, which is the stress hormone. Or you think alcohol makes things more fun. Well, alcohol actually numbs the pleasure centers of your brain to actually make it so that the only thing that's fun is alcohol. And all the joy is stolen from all the other activities if you're not drinking. And it was over and over these like mind-blowing facts. I'm like, how is this happening? Like, it doesn't do what it says on the tin. Like, it's not, you know, it's not showing up how I expected. And so about, I don't know if it was quite a year, but I remember walking out of my office and sort of telling my husband, like, if you want to drink with me, I think you got to do it tonight, because I don't think I'm drinking after tonight. And he was like, yeah, right. But we split a bottle of wine, and then, you know, I was really just done. And that was 6 years ago. And it was so different than all the other times when I tried to stop or cut back before. It was very much like, oh, I don't have to do this anymore. I don't have to stop. And so I took those journals and I put them out for free download just on a website. Didn't really even know what I was doing, just, you know, piece that together. And 20,000 people ended up downloading it in just a few weeks. It was crazy. And so I started getting emails from all over the world, people saying, oh my gosh, this is amazing. You need to make this a book. So then I was like, okay. So then I actually started reading a lot of books. I read Alan Carr, I read Jason Vale, I read Thaddeus Polk, The Neuroscience of Addiction. I read all of these sorts of stuff and actually like put together a proper book and published it about a year after that. And then self-published actually, but since it sold enough copies that it's now traditionally published, and so here I am.
And here you are with a new book which is come out as well. So for those of you who are just joining us, I'm joined by Annie Grace, author of This Naked Mind and the Alcohol Experiment. If you've got questions for Annie, this is a golden opportunity. She's going to be with us for the next half an hour or so. So if you've got an issue that's niggling you about changing your drinking, if you've been trying to quit, maybe struggling, I've got some questions if you don't have any, you know, so, but, you know, if you've got questions, please share them. A couple of things people have shared already. Rachel says, over 800 days free, Annie Grace, because of what you taught me. Thank you. And another person on Facebook said, This Naked Mind is a game changer. They're on day 165. Another one person says, my wife and I are reading This Naked Mind out loud to each other to keep us going. Nearly 3 months. Wow, a chapter works better than a glass.
Wow, that's so cool.
So you're having a really positive impact. But yeah, really excitingly, you have a new book out, and I wondered if you could tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so the new book is The Alcohol Experiment with journaling in it. And so the premise really in a nutshell is this idea that, so I'm bringing the facts, I'm bringing the science, I'm bringing, you know, the information from that perspective, but I have a really deep belief that the true wisdom that you're seeking and the answers that you want are actually inside you, that you know you and what's good for you better than I know you and what's good for you. And so the journaling aspect is really to kind of the 1-2 punch of like, here's the science, but then unlock what this means for you and how this shows up in your life. So actually in the new version of The Alcohol Experiment, the journal itself is right there in the book, which is really helpful. So at the end of every single day, you've got like a page or two to write, and it becomes like we're co-authoring it. And then for you to go back, because so many people do, you know, read the book multiple times, and then you're going back and you not only are reading your own words and your own wisdom, which I believe is just so profound, but then you're able to see your progress. So I think it's a great addition to the book.
And for those who aren't familiar with The Alcohol Experiment and what it's about, can you tell us a bit about the journey that somebody goes through if they pick up the book? Where will it take them from, and where do you think people end up?
So my two books are really kind of two different mindsets, I would say. So This Naked Mind is really in the mindset that I was in, which was very much like, oh my gosh, so many attempts, so much trying, so many different schemes to like trick myself into just not wanting that drink, and so much effort having been put in. And so This Naked Mind, it really from the beginning, it's like, hey, stop trying to stop drinking. Like it literally says that in the first chapter. It's like, don't worry about it now. Like, all I want you to do is just like, let yourself off the hook enough, learn the science of why you're doing this in the first place. Because the truth is, and we overlook this, we have this false belief that there's just a certain percentage of the population who are just afflicted and they're addicted, they're alcoholics, and all the rest of us were just fine. And we completely overlook the fact that alcohol is addictive to people who have like blood and flesh and cells and bones. And so it's just this like really place where you can just let yourself off the hook and be like, oh my gosh, I am learning that my brain is actually doing what it was designed to do in order to survive. And that's why I'm drinking too much. And so it's such a cool journey, but you do it while you're still drinking. And the alcohol experiment is really for people who are like, you know what? No, I've been able to take breaks in the past, no problem. Like I'm happy to take a day or two off. It's not an issue. I'm really more maybe sober curious or into more of a mindful approach. And so I'm really going to go and take this 30-day break. Every single day is delivered kind of that mindset shift. So it's the information, I'd say, is very similar in the two books. It's just kind of the format. And then every day you get, you know, today we're going to talk about alcohol and relaxation. Today we're going to talk about alcohol and sex. Today we're going to talk about your social life. Today we're going to talk about this. And then, of course, the journaling questions to go through really a 30-day experiment, which is framed as not a challenge because it shouldn't be hard. It should be an experiment. And it's not even intended for you to be, okay, right, I'm going to be alcohol free for 30 days. Like, that's great if that's what you want to do. But if you want to read the whole thing while you're drinking, or you want to just see where it takes you, that's okay too. And then at the end of the book, it really maps out two sort of different journeys of, all right, so you want to moderate. Here's 6 things you need to know according to science. Here's the pitfalls. Here's what you need to look out for. Here's some ideas about putting your plan in place. Or, all right, so you want to stay alcohol free for a while. Here are some strategies to really help you do that in the most effortless way possible. So it kind of diverges at the end based on where people want to go.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really important. I mean, certainly from the people that I speak to and the kinds of people who maybe think about doing a dry January, doing a sober October, one of the things that I say to people is, if you are approaching that month and effectively all that you're doing is hitting pause on your drinking, yes, you'll get some physical benefit from that, right? Taking breaks from drinking is good for you. Even if you're moderating long term, you know, taking breaks of a few days or a longer periods of time is going to be good for you. But if all that you're doing is hitting pause on your drinking and you're not actually doing any thinking in that time, you shouldn't be surprised when everything just comes back in February or November or whenever it is that you start again. So I think, yeah, that kind of attitude of here are some things to learn, but also, you know, as you say, that journaling, here are some things to reflect on, and here's some discovery to make about yourself. That's a really powerful tool, I think, for people who kind of taking a pause and then wanting to build a new kind of life as a result of it.
Yeah, and I could just testify to that myself. I mean, I would take breaks and my drinking would come back double time. Like it was almost like, oh, right, okay, I've proven to myself that I don't actually have a problem, that I'm not actually one of those people. So then I'm just going to carry on. And it got somewhat worse after every single sort of break I would take. And I mean, yeah, January 31st, dry January, what happens on February 1st? I mean, statistically, right? It's kind of crazy. So I think that when you've taken a break from alcohol without the mindset work, without the investigation, without the curiosity, without the letting yourself off the hook and awakening this sense of compassion, really what you do is you create a forbidden fruit syndrome. You create a situation where you're on a diet. You're depriving yourself from something you want rather than learning why you might not want that thing in the first place.
Yeah, you're right. And, you know, fad diets work as a way of losing weight for the month that you're doing them, you know, and then, you know, guess what happens? So we're getting a ton of comments and questions coming in. So I just wanted to share a comment. Somebody says your YouTube talks and your book have done so much to help me quit drinking. You're the first person I've listened to and read that sounds a lot like myself. So thank you. And then a question from somebody. So you mentioned about moving to New York. And this person has they live in New York. Their favorite pastime is eating out, and they wonder what your tips are to keep enjoying New York City sober. And I guess that's kind of more broadly for anyone who isn't in New York. I mean, you may have specific city tips, but, you know, for anyone who's thinking about socializing sober or being in a big city environment, being in a work environment, what are the best ways that you can approach that and not drink alcohol?
So a lot of schools of thought think, one of the best things to do is just to sort of avoid being triggered. But I actually think for me in my journey, in my experience, one of the best things to do was to allow myself to be triggered, because it prevented an opportunity to say, okay, why? Why is it that at home, in my apartment, in my flat by myself, I wasn't desiring this, but now all of a sudden in this restaurant, in this ambiance, in this situation, why am I? I remember it wasn't in New York, it was actually in Paddington Station. I remember walking into, I think they had a restaurant there, and it was like a 2-foot high sort of like very beautiful bar, and it was all lit from the bottom, and it was just like gorgeous, like old wood.
Mm-hmm.
And I hadn't even thought about alcohol in months. And I walk in there and I was like, oh, I just had this sense of like,
mm-hmm.
missing out,
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, instead of just walking out and being like, what is that about? I remember just standing there looking at it and being like, what is it? What is it exactly? What is it that I believe right now in this moment that is leading me to feel a desire for a drink? And when I really got, to the crux of it, it was that, I had uncovered another belief that somehow alcohol was wrapped up in this glamorous lifestyle, and that was going to be sitting out. And so I said, okay, well, what if I walked up to that bar, and what if I ordered what was I drinking at the time? I think I was drinking a soda with lime and a splash of cranberry, which was kind of my go-to for a while. Love that drink.
Yep.
And I was like, right. And so sat down, ordered that drink, and I was like, I can enjoy this. And it's nice. And I can appreciate how the glasses are lit and how the bar is, and the fact that it's cozy and it's raining outside. I can appreciate all of this and actually not ingest alcohol. I can buy into the sensory experience without getting drunk. And so for me, that was really useful. And I think that every time we go out, I know it was certain people for me. I'd go out with one person, I wouldn't have any craving. I'd go out with another person and I'd be like, okay, I really want to drink. I remember specifically my mother-in-law. Like, I wanted to drink when I was around my mother-in-law. And I was like, what is this all about, right? And I know that sounds so cliche, but like, it was just that I had been, there's certain aspects of our family that we don't enjoy as much. And so I'd been using alcohol to really tolerate that. And so when that wasn't there, I was like, oh, okay, this is interesting. But I think that every single time we're really tempted in those situations, the more we can expose ourselves with curiosity without judgment, curiosity that we're willing to go into. We're willing to go into the discomfort of the emotion, the discomfort of the craving, and not act on it, and realize it's not going to kill us. We can feel it. We can feel a desire and not act on it. We probably do that all the time in infinite ways. How many times have you walked by a bakery and not eaten everything in the glass case? Or how many times have you walked by, someone you're attracted to and not stopped and tried to get their number? Like we do that. We know how. So let's just apply that here and get really curious about why is it? Because the truth is that in most circumstances, and I would almost argue all circumstances, you don't desire something that you don't believe has a benefit. Usually there is some physicality to it, but that's over in 2 weeks max. Your brain and body have definitely rebalanced by 30 days. So if you're not within the first few weeks, this isn't a physical thing. This is a mental desire for something you think is going to provide you a benefit. And if you can take the time to drill into, okay, what is the benefit? What is the benefit? Then I think you can have a totally different experience of social life in New York City.
Yeah, I completely agree. It is that business, isn't it, of working out what is it that I want to get out of this situation, whether it's a sense of, and you're right, that kind of the beautiful backlit bar and, soft furnishing, that sense of kind of opulence and glamour, all of that can be yours, and you don't have to have a gin and tonic in your hand. You're allowed to sit there and not have alcohol. I mean, it's mind blowing, isn't it, how we do get conditioned into thinking that alcohol is just so much a part of the experience, or so much a part of life, that we can't imagine how life isn't diminished by its absence. And then you suddenly find yourself, okay, so I'm in this situation and I'm not drinking, and all of this other good stuff is still happening. How did I miss that as a fact?
Yeah, so true.
So I have another question for you. This is a personal one for you, which is, do you ever still feel the urge to drink?
I don't. I really don't. I was trying to think like the last time I think that I had one of those experiences that I just talked about. I think it happened to me for probably the first year or so in every new experience. So every time something was new and I hadn't done it before, there was two different emotions. One was uncertainty, a bit of unbalance, a bit of how's this going to be? Is it really going to be good? Is the whole thing going to be a house of cards and fall down and I'm really just wrong? And alcohol really is that elixir of life that is, adding so much to my life and I've just somehow duped myself into not drinking it? Or is this going to confirm for me? And I think the first New Year's, I felt that. We had friends coming over. They were all bringing drinks, and I wasn't drinking. And I was like, okay, how's this going to go? And I remember feeling, and it was less probably of an urge to drink as more of a urge to get out of the discomfort caused by the first experience. I'd say the last time I really felt an urge to drink, it was probably 2 years into it, maybe a little more, and I was at my first wedding. And it was a Jewish wedding. It was my cousin's wedding. And the rabbi was talking about like the tradition of wine and weddings and breaking the wine glass. And like there was all this ceremony about it. And it was, thousands and thousands of years. And I was sitting there I remember sitting there in the chair watching this ceremony, just being like, how can both of these things exist? How can there be so much beauty in this tradition and yet so much like ickiness in my experience of alcohol? And I really felt uncomfortable in that situation. And I remember after the ceremony, we all went in and we went up to the bar, and I had not had not because I think non-alcoholic beer is great. I hadn't actually had one because I just hadn't had the desire to have a drink. And so I ordered a non-alcoholic beer. And by this time my book was out, and and people knew that I wasn't drinking. And so I walked around with this beer in my hand, and I felt like I was getting looks. And I was like, huh. And I felt like I had to be like, no, it's non-alcoholic. It's like I was trying to turn the label so people could tell. And then it just gave me kind of like a gassy stomach. And I was like, okay, this isn't worth it. This isn't incongruent with who I am. But I was trying to kind of handle my discomfort about the whole ceremony and stuff and that urge. And anyway, in that moment, it was one of those things where I just had to say, okay, I'm not probably going to be able to understand how these things coexist in my lifetime. And that just has to be okay, because am I okay with a little bit of not being able to understand how there's so much like tradition and beauty in this service, but I think alcohol is just like poison that I wouldn't put in my body anymore? Yeah. And did the non-alcoholic beer make it better for me? It didn't, because I just felt weird. Although I'm a huge proponent of non-alcoholic drinks if it's right for the person who's drinking them, because I think they can be such a great like habit switch. But that was the last time I really had an urge. And of course, then I went to a wedding after that, and it was so easy. The first time you do anything, it's like, I'm never going to get through this. Oh, it's going to be so hard. And then the next time you do it, you're just kind of like, oh, I survived that. I actually did a kind of play-by-play YouTube video of that whole experience. It's on my YouTube channel, because I like filmed myself in the moment, filmed myself the next morning. Like I made it. And I ended up dancing till late in the night with my kids and having a really good time. And then once you do it once, it's like, oh, all right, don't do it anymore. So no, I haven't had urges in a really long time.
Yeah, absolutely. Another personal question. It's another personal question for you. Hope you don't mind. Which is about changing your drinking, and she asks, I assume did you share your journey with your partner? My husband says, let me skip through, quite a long question. What kind of support did you have, or did you basically do it by yourself and for yourself? Was it a kind of a couples experiment, or a solo adventure, or somewhere in between?
So it was totally solo until it wasn't. So here's what I mean by that is that I walked out of my office that one day. I told my husband, I'm not, if you want to drink with me tonight's the night. And so we split a bottle of wine. And the next morning, he actually told me, he's like, just so you know, I'm never going to stop drinking. This is your thing. This isn't my thing. And I just want to be really honest about that. Because if you have any expectations of me, I just don't want you to have them. So I really appreciated that. I thought it was a gift at the time. And I think if we all just like have that internal dialogue in our own minds with our own partners, we'd be well served, because what that did for me is it said, right, if I'm going to do this, I need to do this by myself. And here's the reality. Anything that we are trying to get our partners to do to make us feel more comfortable is probably going to bite us in the butt. Like, it just really is. Like, when we try to change another human being's behavior to make us feel more comfortable, we're giving them far too much power in our lives. And so he basically had said, like, look, I'm not going to change this behavior. So you feel comfortable or not, but that's on you. And it sounds callous, but in the moment, like, I really look back at it as a gift. Here's the thing is, when we change something, it doesn't matter if it's like you've taken up running, or you're learning a new language, or, you've lost 50 pounds, whatever it is, any change is going to be intense on a relationship. It is going to make that relationship feel a bit off balance and off kilter, because people will feel either like, you're going to be too good for me, you're going to judge me, I'm not going to be good enough for you. There is uncertainty in that. And so I think it's our job as the one changing to do everything we possibly can to make them feel as comfortable as they can with our change, without asking them to change in return. And I think that's where we find the most strength. And so I would actually do things where I would go out and go out of my way to buy him beer, or to, order him a drink when we sat down somewhere, and just to really let him know, like, look, I am not judging you. I will never judge you for this. This is your journey. This is your path. Ironically, he had to read the book about a year later, because it was getting published. And after he read the book, he's like, that's interesting. And I'd say it was probably 3 years after I stopped, he just sort of stopped drinking as well. No fanfare, never said it, never declared it. But like, now, like, I don't remember I know he hasn't had a drink since we've lived in the house we live in, and that was over 3 years ago now. So that's interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So somebody's asked a question. They've asked it a couple of times. It's not an area that I know anything about, and fine if you don't. But somebody who has been in rehab and has asked about choice theory. That's something I'm not familiar with, and I wonder if you are. And they ask if you have any opinions on it.
I have never heard of choice theory. I will be Googling that straight away. Because
me too.
I've never heard of that.
Me too. I'm going to stop looking it up on Wikipedia so I can concentrate on this conversation. Okay, so I've got. So I actually wanted to pose a kind of a puzzle to you, because it's something that's been I've been talking about with a group in the community, and I'd be really interested to get your take on it. And it's the scenario of somebody who knows that they want to stop. And they've got themselves into a pattern of being able to take a month off drinking. They can do that fine, but then they get to day 30, 31, and they know what's going on, but they find themselves drinking again. And then 2 weeks later, they're picking themselves up, stopping for a month, then getting to the end of that, and then starting again. And I wondered if you got any kind of insight on, because this is somebody who knows that they want to stop, they're committed to change, but they find themselves falling into this pattern of behavior, having taken a break again and again and again, and obviously along the way losing confidence and losing motivation and kind of losing self-belief as well, in that kind of really kind of corrosive way that happens. I wonder if you got any insight on ways of breaking that pattern, because I'm guessing that person isn't alone in going through that process.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I think we all need to just realize how typical this is and how long it can take. And I think we overlook that, especially when we get into Facebook groups and communities where, people are having their moment and they have their aha moment and then they never have a drink again, or maybe they'll do my alcohol experiment and they never have a drink again. And we're looking at that from this outside perspective of like, well, why isn't that happening for me? And we have this sense of impatience. And the truth is that I can go back in my journals and I can find 2006, 2007, 2008 entries about me really wanting to change my drinking, starting to set those rules, starting to take those breaks. And then it wasn't until, I think it was 2014 when I actually did. Okay, so that's 6 years. And then I actually did a survey of a bunch of people who are now, happily alcohol free through another program we have called The Path. And I asked them, what on average, the average was 7 years. And there was outliers, there was 10 and 15 years before they actually made it stick. So I think there's just this kind of false belief that it should be I like to draw it out. I don't have anything to draw with, but we think that change is like up and to the right, like this straight thing. Like we start, and change is really like this really windy, you even go backwards sometimes. And so every single thing that's happening is part of the change. I can tell you though, there are two enemies in that, and those are guilt and shame. And so in your blips, you have to, like, if you want to change, you've got to stop beating yourself up. You have to come with self-compassion. You have to, like, if you go into this and you're like so mad at yourself that you're losing momentum, it's really just not a mindset that's going to serve you. Every single time you drink 2 weeks after a 30-day break or whatever your pattern is, it's exactly what I was talking about before. Okay, why? What happened? You have to approach this with curiosity without judgment. It is the thing that will prevent you from actually getting traction is by making those mistakes painful. When you make them painful, you will not approach them with curiosity. You will not look honestly at what was happening, what was going on in your life. You know, people will get in literally the habit of celebrating their alcohol-free days with a drink. This is very typical. People are like, 30 days, I'm going to celebrate with a drink. 100 days, I'm going to celebrate with a drink. This is no big problem, right? Or people will get in the habit of just like mindlessly picking up a drink in whatever circumstance because they just haven't put thought into it. So at the end of the alcohol experiment, I really talk about like, okay, if you're going to drink again, that's fine, but just always give yourself a 24-hour buffer. Never do it in the moment. Never do it in a moment of somebody handing you a beer. Never do it in a moment of grief, a moment of stress. Just always say, I really want to drink. I'm going to do it tomorrow at this time. But between now and then, I'm going to understand the craving and the trigger. And if you do that, then you're going into it really mindfully. You know, that by itself can break that pattern. Just giving yourself that 24 hours. The other thing that people do is they will get addicted to the pity party that they have for themselves and that everybody else then has for them when they kind of like make a mistake again. And so if you can eliminate that, because it feels really good, the outpouring of love, and especially in communities like Club Soda, like the outpouring of like, oh my gosh, no, you know, you post something like, I can't believe it, I did it again, this has been, I just don't get it, where am I? And the outpouring, the hundreds of comments, it's like so beautiful. But that by itself can like be just this filling up of like, oh, that feels good. The brain wants to do that again. I know it sounds so crazy, but it's so
no, not at all.
Right? And so what you can do is you can avoid that by when you post about it, if you feel like that's ringing a bell for you, when you post about it, do it with the sense of here's what happened, here's what I learned, but avoid the like, oh, and I'm so upset, I'm so mad at myself. Because when you're saying I'm so upset and I'm so mad at myself, you haven't done what I said in the first place, which is put down those weapons of guilt and shame. If you don't put down those weapons, you're not going to awaken the self-compassion that is scientifically proven to be the catalyst for change. It is the thing that will change this for you. Self-compassion will break this cycle. I know it sounds counterintuitive. The science backs it up. It is so many studies. It is self-compassion. The number one thing, there's a Stanford researcher. His name is Dr. B.J. Fogg. Amazing guy. He's been researching this habit change for 10 years now, all sorts of different meta-analysis, all sorts of stuff. Phenomenal researcher. He came out with a theory, which makes so much sense once you hear it. And you're like, why haven't we seen this before? He says, there's one thing that affects habit change. One thing. It's not 21 days or 60 days or 365 days. It's one thing. It's positive emotion. If you can associate positive emotion with the new habit you're doing, you will change it. And by coming in and having like a pity party, you're associating positive emotion with the mistake, not positive emotion with the alcohol free, right? Actually, guilt is scratching an itch, right? You're making yourself flagellating yourself. You're feeling so bad. You feel like you don't deserve anything. But if you can just really be like, no, I am going to really tap into self-compassion here and take responsibility. Okay, I did that. It wasn't great, but I'm not going to beat myself up. I'm trying again today. And when you can make that switch internally from going from like, oh, poor me, I'm on the cycle, I'm not going to get it. And remember, there's been a study that was done that for cigarettes, and it said the average time that somebody wants to actually change their behavior to when they break the addiction is 6 years. And again, with my informal survey, it was an average of 7 years. This is not an overnight thing. And often when you
No.
see something overnight for someone, it's because they've been like me, trying for a long time, and then finally they put those missing pieces in place, those things like really understanding the mindset and changing to self-compassion. So I think that is the thing that I would say overall: put down the weapons of blame and shame, take total responsibility, and do it with curiosity, but without judgment, with this level of self-compassion, and you will be able to break that cycle.
Thank you so much. That is really sound advice. So Beverly asks, and actually it's a question that I've got as well, which is, any tips for approaching your first sober Christmas?
So remember that the first time you do anything is going to be uncomfortable. Just allow that to be the case. And then approach it with this sense of like, don't expect that it's going to be amazing and all rainbows and sunshine, because you're going to remember to all expect that it's going to have ups and downs, but also don't expect it to be miserable, because if you expect it to be miserable, it certainly will be. So just say, I'm going to let reality be whatever reality is. I'm going to get through it. If I have to take times where I like literally take 5 minutes, go and, I would do this all the time. I would go into the bathroom with my phone and just journal in my notes app, or do like a voice memo to myself to remember how I was feeling, to remember what I was triggered by, so I could come back to it later. And just allow that the first time you do anything is going to be a bit bumpy. It's going to be a bit bumpy. And so don't beat yourself up for that. We have, when it comes to kind of humans constructing emotion, I really like to think of it in 3 buckets, right? We have what's called our affect, which is like what we physically feel. So if we're hungry, or if we feel tired, or if we feel stressed or whatever, this is the physicality. This is the chemicals in our body. Maybe we have a lot of cortisol or whatever the case is. But then we have the story we tell about that affect. And so you might go into a situation where you just are on high alert because it's COVID and it's Christmas and people are together or not together and you're lonely, or, whatever the case is, you've got affect, you've got physical sensations in your body. But then we add this next layer, and this is the story we give those sensations. And usually when you're trying to change your drinking, the story you give all of your physical sensations is, oh, I feel this way because I'm not drinking. It would be better with a drink. It's like clockwork. And so if you can say, wait a second, that's the story. I mean, there's literally been studies done that say the same feeling of excitement is the exact same feeling as terror in the body. The chemicals are the same. It's just the story. We're going to feel excited if we are, at a surprise birthday party. We're going to feel terror if we're out in the woods by ourselves. Like, this is exactly the same chemical feelings. It's just the story. So be really alert to your story. And so when you start to feel bad, notice your story. Is the story like, oh, I knew it. I knew Christmas was going to suck. I knew I wasn't going to be able to handle, my father-in-law without a drink. Oh, so be really mindful of the story, because the story is what's going to take that physicality that you're feeling, which is going to be intense because it's Christmas and COVID, and then make it mean something. There's a third layer to emotion, and this is the other one you have to be super careful about, and that's judging what you feel. So you feel this thing and you're upset and whatever, but then you get all judgmental. Oh, I shouldn't feel like this. I've already been alcohol free for 30 days. I shouldn't be thinking this. I shouldn't be wanting a drink. I thought I was past this. And so we have this whole layer of judgment. And all of a sudden we just have this affect, this feeling in our body, these chemicals, but we've layered on this meaning and we've layered on this judgment. And then no wonder want to escape all that. So when you can just start to be really mindful and curious about those other 2 aspects of emotion, then you can be like, oh, okay, I'm just feeling something in my body. That's okay. I can feel something. And I'm just going to be curious how this is going to go. And I'm going to know that the first Christmas is going to be the first Christmas. There always has to be a first of everything. And the more you can take away the judgment of yourself for it and the meanings you're creating around it, the more you can just let it be what it is and actually maybe even enjoy it.
Fabulous, thank you. And I echo what Deb says in the comment. She says, this is so helpful, thank you. I've got another question for you, which kind of looking ahead. I actually want to kind of circle back to something you said about the kind of the overnight success image. It's one of the things that I see people struggle with as well, is stumbling over day ones and imagining that there's going to be a moment where you begin this journey and then it's going to proceed flawlessly from then, and then kind of beating yourself up. And I said to somebody last week, in my experience of change in life, I can look back I can make sense of my life looking back, and I can say, okay, that was the moment in which things really began to shift or change in this area of my life. But I couldn't possibly have known or projected in advance that it was going to be that moment. I would have thought it was something else. But so, and I wonder when people are thinking ahead and maybe thinking about intentions for a new year, what kind of tips do you have to do that in a way which is meaningful and which doesn't set you up to fail, and to kind of beat yourself up, and those keep those weapons of shame and guilt, as you mentioned, away? What kind of tips do you have for kind of thinking ahead, making good intentions for a new year, and things that you can really stick to?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, what you said is just so true for so many people. And it's it's another day one until it's your last day one. And obviously, in most cases, people don't realize it's their last day one when it is their last day one. And it isn't until hindsight that you see, oh, that was the last one. That was my last drink. I couldn't have told you in the moment. It kind of felt like every other time I'd attempted this. And that's why it's so important that conversation around self-compassion, because it's self-compassion and knowing that the only way that you can fail at this is to give up is going to be the motivator to get you to that last day one. Whereas giving up because you're blaming yourself and you're like, this is never going to work anyway, and that really negative emotion is going to be the thing that really prolongs that. Self-compassion absolutely shortens the journey. But very specifically in terms of the new year, and trying to think about, okay, like, first of all, I just wouldn't put so much pressure on it. Like, I wouldn't put so much pressure on it. There's two concepts I want to share. One is this idea of moving the target closer. And I talk about this a lot in the alcohol experiment. So a really good friend of mine, Alex, he is a sharpshooter and he's very, very, very talented, but he was a horrible shot until he went and got lessons. And in the shooting range, the instructor brought him right up to the target and he was literally a foot away. He could not miss. And he's like, this is stupid, I can't miss. And the instructor's like, yeah, that's the point. And then he backed him up and he shot again and he backed him up. And as soon as he would miss a little, he would walk him forward. And in that way, Alex's brain built on success instead of failure. So when we put these like, this is my last day one, I'm never drinking again, and then we fail at that, what does that teach us? Like, it's so counterproductive. But if we say, you know what? January 1st, I'm not going to drink on January 1st. That is my goal. I'm not going to drink on the 1st of January. Or maybe you feel really confident and you're like a few feet further back from the target and you're like, first week of the year, I'm not going to drink the first week of the year. Hell or high water. Doesn't matter if I'm crying on the couch with like a tub of ice cream. I'm not drinking the first week of the year. But you make yourself a commitment you will succeed at. And then you allow yourself to build on success instead of doing what we usually do, which is make commitments that we're not even going to know we're successful with until we're dead. And like, of course we have negative emotion like that. And we want positive emotion. Remember, positive emotion is the key to change. So that's number one, is build on success. And then number two is I would actually consider that your New Year's resolution this year perhaps become an emotion rather than a behavior. So often we're like, I'm not going to eat carbs. I'm only going to drink this many drinks. And it's behavior based, right? But if you actually make a resolution of, in 2021, no matter what, I'm going to show up with self-compassion every time I make a mistake. That will change your life a lot more than I'm not going to drink. I promise you. If you make a behavior, in 2021, am going to exercise every single day. Maybe you make an emotion. In 2021, I'm going to learn how to have compassion for my body, no matter how it looks, and appreciate it because it keeps me alive, right? And so you make an emotion-based commitment for like an emotion, you can actually, I think, change your life so much further and in much more profound ways than when we get really stuck in these behavior-based resolutions.
Thank you for that. On the subject of bodies and exercise, and we were kind of somebody's asked this question. They've read that sugar cravings are a very real thing after stopping alcohol. And having conversations with others, have you found that this is permanent or does it pass?
It passes. It is a real thing. So here's the explanation. Alcohol overstimulates dopamine in the brain. So does anything else that's addictive, from high fructose corn syrup, sugar, to Netflix, to Instagram, whatever it is. Anything that's addictive is going to overstimulate dopamine in the brain. Dopamine is the chemical that's going to tell your brain, that thing you just did, do that thing again. It is like the survival reward learning chemical. That's what happens, right? So you take alcohol away and the brain's like, where's all that dopamine gone? Like, this makes no sense. I want more of this. And so it knows what else provides dopamine is sugar. And it is going to want that dopamine back. So it's going to want that sugar. And so for me, I just gave into it. I was like, you know what? If I'm not ordering a drink at this restaurant, I'm going to order dessert. I don't care if everybody else isn't ordering dessert. I'm ordering dessert. You know, I like had gummy bears in my pockets. You know, like I would just literally like be, okay, well, it's better than drinking. Let's see how this goes. And it did for me. It totally went away because your brain does get used to less dopamine. I mean, sugar provides less than alcohol, unless you eat so much of it that you physically make yourself ill. And so over time, it just becomes less and less and less and less. And to the point where, you know, I think overall, I don't eat nearly as much sugar as I used to, but, and I even went for a few years barely eating any sugar, but that was just after a long time. So I think, again, back to the New Year's resolution thing, we often say, okay, I'm going to stop eating sugar and I'm going to stop drinking. I'm going to take up yoga and I'm going to write a novel. This is my plan for 2021. Right? Yeah. And I think we're so much better served to say, I'm going to do this one thing. I'm going to do this one thing and I'm going to do it well. I'm going to build on success. And, you know, maybe that's just showing up with self-compassion, no matter how things look, with the intention of drinking less or changing your drinking. But then really allowing that, yeah, let me get this thing solid. Let me get mastery over this. Let me get this to where this is effortless. And then I can look at something else. And that's how the brain works. That's how it learns. And if we don't do it that way, I think that we are often just setting ourselves up for more of that guilt, shame cycle.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're so right. And I think that the business of being compassionate to yourself, you know, if you are putting yourself into a situation where you are making change difficult, you are making it less likely that it's going to work out fundamentally. And if you know, and I often kind of encourage people to think about, you know, if they were caring for a child that was upset, you know, your child doesn't become less upset when you shout at them, when you're angry with them, when you know, have that kind of same compassion that you have towards yourself, you know, and take these things as they come. You're right. You know, it is a journey. It's about what you can achieve right now. And if what you can achieve right now is learning to be more compassionate to yourself, letting yourself off the shame and guilt and kind of focusing on positive things, that's going to be an excellent thing to do. Annie, we are coming towards the end of our time. Thank you so much for your generosity in your time and answering all of these questions for people in the community. I just want to swing back round to the fact that you're here because you've got a book. So I wonder, for those people who've kind of joined later on in this conversation, if you could just kind of like, if you could recap a bit about the Alcohol Experiment, what it's about, and maybe how people can get hold of it if they want a copy for themselves.
Yes, we have like just out sort of brand new book, 30-day experiment, not a challenge, just to kind of test the waters, dip a toe, see if being alcohol free does bring you joy, make you happier. You know, so often we're asking this question, do I have a problem? Like, what's wrong with me? And the Alcohol Experiment really encourages you to ask a different question, which is like, is this good enough? Could it be better? Let me find out. Let me have this hypothesis that maybe it could if I drank a bit less, and let me find out. And then there's no predictive end, so you don't have to get sober or anything like that. It really, at the end, is about like choosing your own path and your own journey, just equipped with the facts. So often we know more about like the side effect of, you know, painkillers, over-the-counter painkillers, than we do about the side effects of alcohol. So in a very non-terrifying way, it's just about educating yourself. There's a whole journal involved in it. And I think the most exciting part of the book is that there's a free companion website with daily videos and emails every single day at alcoholexperiment.com. So you can always join that as well.
Fabulous. So yeah, the Alcohol Experiment is an expanded edition, 30-day alcohol-free challenge to interrupt your habits and help you take control. Published by Penguin Random House, is out now. Annie, thank you so much for joining us. I've really loved our conversation. And take very good care of yourself. You're up in the Snowy Mountains, right?
Very snowy today. It's like this much on the ground. So yeah, in Colorado.
Beautiful. Enjoy the